Alrighty, we're gonna do another review today. Today we're doing We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. Do not ever trust my pronunciation of anything, please, for the love of God. So we're gonna start with the basic breakdown of the plot. We Hunt the Flame is the first book of a series, which I wish I had known before I started it. It focuses on the story of Zafira, the hunter, the only person who is able to enter this enchanted dark forest that surrounds their world, and Nasir, the prince whose father forces him to act as his personal assassin. Their world was once this prosperous, magical place where everyone had their own special magical abilities. It was protected by this group of amazing magical sisters who made sure that they were safe and had control of their magic and stuff like that. But then something happened. The sisters all disappeared / maybe died, and the people's magic all disappeared. Also, different parts of the realm started having different problems, like there are droughts in one area, and where Zafira is from, there is snow. Lots and lots of snow. And on top of that, the Sultan of this world starts basically losing his mind and going from a relatively good king to a batshit crazy dictator who uses his son as an assassin, so not good. Zafira and Nasir are both given missions. Zafira is given a mission by a random witch who appears and tells her that she's the only one who's going to be able to go to this island. Map time! This island in the center of their world, past the dark, mysterious, magical forest, where all the magic, it seems, is being kept, and she'll be able to save them and get it back. And Nasir is sent by his father to catch the hunter, kill them, steal whatever it is they capture, and kill anyone else involved in the mission. So happy adventures. I ordered this book because it kept showing up on lists of great new fantasy books that don't focus on medieval European lore. This book actually focuses primarily building off of Middle Eastern lore, which is really cool. This element of it I absolutely loved. And it felt really fresh because it was dealing with a lore that you don't read in every single fantasy novel. On the other hand, that made the tropes that are super duper normal fantasy really stand out. Specifically, the two tropes that really stood out to me are the strong female character dressing as a boy so that she has the freedom to be a hero. I mean, I am not one to talk. I have written this trope before. I like this trope. But it's just a bit cliche. And for a good bit of the beginning of the book, it felt like that's all Zafira was. The other overused trope that really stood out to me happens to be one of my least favorite tropes, which is the will they won't they couple that are just about to get together, have all but confessed, and then one of them panics and says something stupid, which throws the other off, and then they start snapping at each other, and then suddenly they hate each other. I'm just so tired of it. Like, I don't see why it needs to be so difficult for two people who clearly, obviously like each other to just get on with it. General rule of thumb, if it happened on Friends, I probably don't want to read it in your book. Which leads me to my biggest complaint of all about this book. It took me forever to get to know the two leads and to get the story started. I think part of what made it so draggy to me in the beginning was the rhythm of the book itself. We Hunt the Flame is written in really short chapters. Like, I'm talking about 2 or 3 pages for most of these chapters, which is fine, but the chapters also alternate between Zafira and Nasir, jumping back and forth, often in the first half of the book, to things that are happening on other sides of the continent. And that gives me less than a full page sometime to get into what's going on, to really get to know the emotional resonance of this scene before suddenly we're elsewhere and something completely different is happening. This is less of a problem once the two characters get together, because then it feels less like we're jumping to new scenes every 2 pages, and more like we're just jumping to the same scene from a different point of view, because things are happening at the same place, but it made it really hard for me to get into it at the very beginning. This book also has the problem of one of the two main characters is someone you probably won't like when you first meet them. Nasir is a lot of things that, if you just describe him, match what I like in a good character. He's damaged, he's secretly loving, he's cold as hell on the exterior. But we learn that about him as the book progresses. In the beginning, he's just a whiny, cold-blooded killer, and that's not that interesting to me. The last thing I didn't really like about this book is I'm not sure the author knew exactly what needed to be defined and what didn't. This shows up in little ways, like words that are just dropped without any definition until like halfway through the book, or never defined at all. The one that really stands out in my mind is coffee. The book uses a specific word for coffee that I honestly assume is a traditional Middle Eastern word. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, but it's just a word that's dropped here and there as they're drinking this, they're drinking this, they're drinking this, and it's never defined that it's coffee until like 100 pages in. So I'm sitting there going, is this alcohol? Is this a magical world beverage? Like, I don't know. And for coffee, it didn't really matter that much. Like, it didn't really matter if I knew this was coffee. But it gets more problematic when what the author doesn't seem to know whether or not it needs to be defined is the big stuff. Like, specifically, what happened with the sisters and the lion. Bits and hints are dropped here and there throughout the entire book, so much so that you sort of feel like you know what happened, even though you don't have a clear picture in your head, or at least I didn't, of the events that led to the sisters' disappearance. So much so that when there is that big reveal moment at the end, it feels a little bit like you're looking at the characters going, how the hell did you not know this? I'm pretty sure you already said all this. You knew this is what happened, right? But at the same time, I've read the entire book and I'm still not 100% clear exactly what happened. Now that I've gotten the negatives out of the way, I sort of loved this book. Zafira, once I got to know her, was a believable, likable lead. Nasir was the exact kind of pathetic but strong character that I personally love. There was some beautiful world building, and the world itself was not the same pseudo-medieval European fantasy world that I feel like majority of fantasy takes place in. And unlike some other pseudo-Middle Eastern fantasy that I've read, this one feels like it has more weight to it. This doesn't feel like somebody saw Disney's version of Aladdin and got inspired. And that's probably because the author actually is of Middle Eastern descent, so she lives in this culture and it feels a lot more weighty. It feels more lived in. One of my favorite parts about this book is the rest of the group that ends up on the quest, and in fact, if I'd been the editor, I probably would have asked the author to go ahead and introduce the rest of them a bit earlier. Like, I liked them. The relationship between Zafira and Nasir seemed pretty organic, but the one stupid cliche moment. And by the end of the book, I was hardcore rooting for the two of them to end up together. Overall, it is a book I still might buy the rest of the series, even though, frankly, a large portion of it annoyed me. But it was a good book.